Sifu owns.
I'm gonna stake around. I'm gonna turn my camera off. I want to listen to Cedric because the man is incredible. Anybody, you are in for a treat.
Mhm.
This man, oh my gosh, he's a beautiful soul,
Wow.
Cedric.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he's
Oh
in
my
my next
goodness.
book with us too. He's in my next book with us too. But with
Love it.
that, thank you again, Sifu. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Cedric Singleton, the amazing finance guru. That's what I'm going to call him. And then the rest, I'm going to let him explain. And then he will also post something again in the chat because I'm sure it's lost now. Because they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's going crazy today. It's off the chart. We're almost at like 200 and we just started an hour
No
ago.
problem. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. Great, great, great. I got Christine hooked me up. My old computer was acting crazy, so I got a new computer, got a new mic. So I feel Hollywood now. Hoo-hoo. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. I have to send you a request here. I sent the
Okay, wait.
request.
If you're going to, oh, I see. Okay, this is how that works. So look at that. There we go.
Share request.
Did you get, can you share? If not, I can make you co-host. It's not a big deal.
I think I can share now. Yep, I can share.
Okay, good. Oh,
Uh,
better.
let's move this all the way up here. And let me share. I think it's sharing. Uh, can you see the screen?
Yeah, but it's just showing this. Oh, there we go. There you go. It just
Okay,
takes a
let me
while.
put it in
Oh,
screen mode here. Duplicate. And now I think we are good to go. All right. So, what I'm doing is a little different. I've been doing workshops on what I think is what's becoming a pretty interesting topic, communication and effective communication. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of my background in a moment. But Sifu, he mentioned just before he finished his talk, he talked about his fiance's nickname for him being Boo Bear, and that he was easygoing, and that it's easy to engage with him. Those were all kind of ways that they connect and communicate with each other. And I'm going to talk a lot about that because right now, there's a lot of ways that we communicate, with social media, with X and Twitter, and I guess Blue Sky and all of our devices. And what I have been finding when I do my workshops, I know Marianne mentioned finance, but my big thing is leadership development, right? And I'll talk about my background, and I do a lot of different workshops in that space. And while we have a lot of ways of communicating, the big question is how well are we connecting with one another, especially nowadays. And so that's going to be what I'm going to share with this audience today is how to effectively connect when we're communicating in today's, information superhighway, so to speak. So a little bit about my background. So I started my professional career in the U.S. Army. I was an armor officer for 4 years. Got a chance to play around with tanks, if you will. And then I spent about 30 years in corporate America. I was in healthcare with Abbott Laboratories and then Carrier Global, all in kind of the professional sales and marketing space. Um, and then in sales operations, basically teaching and training our internal sales teams to perfect skills like how to effectively negotiate, team building skills, and effective communication, the topic that I'm going to really cover today. And so I retired from corporate America a couple years ago and founded my company, Peak Performance Leadership Institute, and got into the corporate speaking and leadership development space. few certifications. I think many people might be familiar with John Maxwell. So I got certified through John Maxwell with leadership training and coaching. Pat Lencioni, he's the guru of sort of team optimization and team building. So I got certified to do team assessments through his training. And LaFleur leadership, his sort of area of expertise is soft skills certifications. So I got corporate training executive certifications there, and then small business veterans. So that's kind of my certification sort of suite, if you will. So now what I'm going to do is kind of get into the meat of what I'm going to talk about today, and that is effective communication. And so to frame this out, what I'm sharing is kind of a full day's workshop that I go through, but I'm kind of giving you kind of the Cliff Notes version. So some of these slides are some of the material that I go through in the workshop. So that's kind of how it's presented. So it won't apply necessarily in this case, but I'm still kind of going to kind of use the slides. But I always start off by saying that I think it's very important that we all invest in our development, our growth and development. And I think it's very important that we do things like we're doing on this call, right? We do, listen and spend time sharpening our skills, sharpening our tools. The talk that Sifu just had, the talk that we're all having all day in this great platform that Marianne has presented. This is great. And so there's a responsibility that people like myself that we have, when you're spending time listening to us. So that being the case, my commitment is that I want this to be engaging. I don't want to waste your time. So I always want to make sure that two things. One, that I acknowledge the fact that it's important that we invest in our growth and development, but it's equally important that I don't waste your time. With that, I also want to provide you with tools on whatever the topic that I'm covering, that I give you value and I give you tools. So I did put a tool, a PDF tool in the Facebook Live. I will put it back in the live because I'm sure it's probably somewhere there, but I'll drop it back in the live once I'm done with this talk. But also, since the topic is, how to effectively communicate and connect, I always, at the beginning of workshops, try to get what are the expectations of those that are in the workshop? What do they want to get out of it? And I'm going to share with you some of the feedback that, that I get typically when we conduct these workshops, because I want to always make sure that, I get a good grounding, a good level set, so it can be the most impactful session, because these workshops are typically between a half day and a full day. And I want to make sure that we're tracking and aligned with what I'm going to cover and what they're expecting to get out of it, right? And so this is some of the common feedback, right? It's a communication workshop. So first and foremost is, how can I improve my listening skills? Which makes sense because a part of communication, and I think even Sifu mentioned this during his talk, is listening. One of the biggest challenges oftentimes in a conversation is effectively listening. So that's oftentimes some of the things that we talk about. And I should mention that these workshops, whether they're virtual or in person, we have discussions. So whether they're discussions that are in the chat, or we do the reaction where you can raise your hand and then we just talk, we have discussions around these points. Many of these people that are in the workshops, they either are a part of teams or they lead teams, and they want to know, how can I use communication to better inspire or be better team players? How can I inspire my team? Or how can I be a better team player? So through communication, how can I be more effective, especially if I'm communicating through devices, right? If I'm communicating through chats and stuff like that, where a lot of times things can be lost in translation, right? I may think that I conveyed a certain message, but did the person receive the message as intended? So did things get lost in translation, and how could that impact what I meant to say versus what someone heard? So that is another thing that, we cover. And the other thing is sometimes people are just in roles like HR role, or they may be in a role where they're in quality control, or regulatory or compliance, where the nature of their role is that they have to communicate rules and policy. So if they're in that kind of role, right, some of the things that they have to communicate might be, not that positive. So sometimes the question is, when I have to be the bad guy, just as it relates to my job, how is there a good way to communicate, things when the nature of my job might be a little bit more on the negative side? So we kind of walk through and talk through, that. And then that final point is what I call the money question, or the money expectation. What the heck does connecting have to do with communicating? Because that really is the title of the workshop. How to effectively communicate. How to effectively communicate by effectively connecting. So what does connecting have to do with communicating, and how do they relate to one another? So that's what we cover in the workshop. So then we get into the 3 topics. So we talk about the why, the what, and the how. First and foremost, why is communicating important, specifically important in order to be successful? And then the meat of the whole conversation, the meat of the whole workshop is, what's the difference between communicating and connecting, right? And is there a difference? Like, what is the difference? Again, we do a lot of communicating. Much of what we do all day, every day, again, through social media, through texting, through devices, is technically communicating. How effective are we connecting with one another? That is the question. And how important is answering that question? And then the third thing is, how do we effectively do that? Because it's going to be more and more and more and more. And do we hand off communicating to AI, ChatGPT? And when we do that, how much of what we do gets lost in translation? So it's a huge topic, right? So these are the things that we cover. So then we have just a big conversation. Sometimes this conversation lasts for maybe a half hour, especially if we're in person, because this just becomes a big foundational topic that we want to make sure that we get grounded on. Why is communication important to success? So we really, really just grapple with this conversation. I love it when we have these workshops in person, because this becomes a real centering discussion. But here are some of the outcomes of these conversations. It becomes clear that if you have really good communication, you can clear up misunderstandings, and you can avoid unnecessary conflict, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of, talking or communicating to clear up what you think someone said versus what they meant. If you really are working to accomplish different goals, you have to have good communication to be productive and get things done. Another thing that comes up is, how many times do 2 or 3 different people do the same thing and they don't know that they're doing the same thing? So you're wasting a whole bunch of time doing the exact same thing. So communication clears that up. And then the final thing, and I think we've all been there, and that is in every kind of relationship, communication is important. Whether it's a romantic relationship, a work relationship, a friendship, oftentimes it rises and falls depending on how well you communicate with one another. So these are some of the big elements of communication. But here is the key. Based on a study at Harvard Business School, the number one criteria for advancement for promotion for professionals is the ability to communicate effectively. So the why, as it relates to why communication is important, is it's important for your advancement and your success. So based on everything that we believe is important for communicating, studies show that if you want to get ahead, you have to be able to communicate effectively. That's just the bottom line. And the key word in this particular study is effectively. So now we have to determine what is effective communication, right? Because as I mentioned before, we are communicating all over the place. Right? Now, the question is, how effective are we communicating? And in this study, they broke down effective and ineffective. And on the left-hand side, these are all the attributes of ineffective communication, which we can figure out, right? Not paying attention, lack of understanding, lack of interest. On the right-hand side, active listening, trust, empathy, genuine interest in the other person, right? So that question at the very beginning, which was, what the heck does connecting have to do with communicating? Well, if you look at the difference between ineffective communication and effective communication, the difference between the two is the ability to connect. If you have effective communication, you are connecting. If your communication is ineffective, you can look at it. You're not paying attention. You have negative body language. There's a lack of interest. You are not making a connection. And what does that look like visually? If you look at the left-hand side, that's what not connecting looks like. If you look at the top left-hand side, I call that the tennis match, right? If you think of a tennis match and you're hitting a tennis ball back and forth, right? You're basically waiting for the ball to come to your side so you can just hit it back. And in the conversation, you're just waiting for your opening so you can say your part and hit the ball back. You're not really listening for anything other than to say your piece. In the bottom left, if you have a child, I have a 30-year-old, a 34, and a 43. We've all been there. I have been that mother in the seat, that mother in that chair is just, with the hand up. I've been that as well. She is talking to herself, right? There's no connecting with that daughter on the cell phone, right? There is ineffective communication and there's not a connection. And conversely, on the right-hand side, that is what effective communication looks like. They are connecting, right? There's active listening, there's empathy, there's trust. There are all the elements of making a connection. So now let's summarize. Why is communication important? Based on the study, it's important in order to get ahead in life. Now, what's the what? How do you do it? What do you do to make an effective, to communicate effectively? You have to make a connection. And this is what making a connection looks like. So now the how. How do you make a connection? I'm going to walk through 3 tools, 3 practices. And to walk through these practices, I'm going to use John Maxwell. John Maxwell, for those of you who know, he is the guru of leadership. He's written over 100 books on leadership. I don't know how he does it, but he written 100 books. This is one of the books. Everyone communicates, few connects. I put in the live chat, and I'll put back in the Facebook chat a PDF of the 6 practices that he has in this book. I'm going to go through 3 of the 6, and again, in the PDF are all 6. And if you immediately use these 3 connecting tools, it can improve your ability to effectively communicate. So now let's walk through these 3. The first practice is finding common ground. And what does this mean? What this means is that you have to meet people where they are. It's a little bit tough, especially as a grown-up, because what it means is we come into every situation with our own perspective. Finding common ground means that you basically suspend your own perspective and you meet people where they are. You're inviting, and you basically just eliminate your perspective, and you just take their perspective, and you give them the space to see things from their point of view, and you're just actively listening, right? You're just listening, not necessarily for judgment, but you're just listening to hear their side of how they see things. No judging. You're just listening. You're just seeing how they see things. I almost call it, as a matter of fact, is it Marianne and Sifu? You guys are starting a podcast. It's like a podcast, right? Some of these Joe Rogan, Shannon Sharp, all these podcasts. It's amazing when they get these celebrities on the couch, and all of a sudden, for an hour or 2 hours, sometimes they get them to drinking also, but you hear things from these folks that you've never heard, and you've known them for years, and all of a sudden I have no idea what those couches do. It's like truth serum, right? but you connect with them in ways that you never have before. But if you can think of common ground as putting them on the podcast couch, that's really what it's all about. It's not about you at all. It's just giving them a space to get to know them. So finding common ground and using that practice and connecting and basically trying to have a conversation where you're just absolutely listening to that person so that you can learn about them. And that's really what this practice is all about. So that is the first sort of common ground practice to have an effective conversation and learn about other people, their perspective, and be an effective communicator. The next practice, the practice of simplicity. Now, in a workshop, what I do here is I'll ask everyone to think of someone who they feel near and dear and dear about, a relative, a spouse who they care a whole lot about. And I would ask them in maybe 6 or 8 words to describe that person. Just a few words to describe that person. And I'll give them maybe about 30, 40 seconds. And what will always happen is they'll say something like, biggest heart in the world, or the most caring person I know, or the most loving man I've ever met. And then that will give me the opportunity to say, these are powerful, simple, connecting words. And the whole point is, when you're using simple connecting words, they don't have to be overly big, complicated statements. When you're connecting, the simpler it is, and the more it connects and it reaches a person's heart, the more impactful it is. I took a note when Sifu was talking, and he mentioned that his fiance calls him Boo Bear. And he said his fiance described him as easygoing. And they engage with one another. That was a perfect example of what I'm describing here. You're keeping it simple, and they, without question, they have a connection, right? They communicate all the time. If he wasn't driving, he would have hugged her, right? I think he said, right? That's the perfect example of keeping it simple. An example of when people go overboard is I always think of graduation commencement speeches. If you can think of these college or even high school graduations where you get very accomplished people, they may have done some of the biggest things that you would ever want to do. Doctors or lawyers or entrepreneurs that have done incredible things. So they're keynote speakers at graduations, and in many cases, they feel like they have to give these huge, big word, long speeches, and they lose the audience because for whatever reason there's this feeling that you have to just wow people. If you want to see an example of the, in my opinion, the best commencement speech ever, go on YouTube and or Google Dr. Dan Black, Clark Atlanta commencement. I think it was called Here They Come, Y'all, Here They Come. It was a Clark Atlanta University commencement last summer. It was 15 minutes long. From the beginning to the end, the graduates, the staff, anyone listening to it was on their feet. It was simple, plain spoken, and he had the audience from the first word to the last word. Dr. Dan Black, Here They Come, Y'all, Here They Come, Clark Atlanta commencement. If you Google it, you'll see it. I think it went viral. It was as plain spoken as they come. That is how you give a plain spoken speech. And I won't say anything else. Just Google it and you'll see what I mean. It does not have to be overly complicated. When you are use this practice, you're trying to pull people in. And so on this slide right here, the 4 ways to connect through communication, those 4 H's, you can pull people in with humor. You can pull people in by touching their hearts. You can pull people in by giving them hope, right? You can pull people in when you help them. In the 3 S's, you pull people in when you keep it simple, when you say it slowly, and every time you have a smile. When you're keeping it simple, you're trying to pull people in. And when you're connecting, that's all you're really trying to do. Almost by nature, connecting means bringing people close to you. So that's the second practice. And then the third, I love this one. I don't know if you can see this, but connecting is it's the concept that we're all kind of simple people with our unique likes. So this is a little elephant here. This is a ceramic elephant, right? The ceramic elephant. My wife, for whatever reason, she loves elephants, any kind of elephant of any type. And her favorite color is purple, right? So this is a purple elephant. So maybe about 10 years ago at work, we had a team building event. Me and my team went to like this little arts and craft place where we could have lunch and they could help us do a ceramic, make a ceramic, whatever, a ceramic plate, whatever the thing is. I knew my wife liked elephants, so I did this ceramic elephant, right? And you can paint it. To be very honest, the experts there, they kind of did most of the work. but anyway, I got the credit. So we did the ceramic elephant, and I knew my wife at the time, she didn't have the best week at work. So I had this elephant, and I got on the way home, I bought some flowers and I bought like a card. I at the dinner table, I put the elephant, the card, the flowers, and you know, had dinner and everything else. And you would have thought that, you know, I did the biggest thing on earth for my wife, right? I did number two on this list. I communicated to her in her world, right? I made it about her world. The elephant wasn't a huge, big thing, but it's something she likes. Purple is her color, and I made it about what she likes. The idea of making it a great experience is finding out the little things that people like and making it a big deal for them. It's not about the money. It's not about the anything like that. It's just finding the little things that a particular person or people like and making a big deal about it. Again, connecting is about bringing people in on their terms. And so the practice of creating an experience is basically finding the little things that a person or people like and making a big deal about it. So those are three practices that you can immediately try, and it will help your ability to communicate immediately. And there are three more in the PDF that I'll send out, and that will help you be a much more effective communicator. And I will close with this. First, I want to always thank anyone who spends the time to take, you know, their valuable time away from whatever, you know, life is bringing their way, and to make the investment on themselves. Right? Like I said before, I think that is very important. You know, that you invest in your growth and development. I take this as a very important task. I am humbly grateful that you spend the time to hear me. So I hope that this was beneficial to you. I try to make sure that it is. But at the same time, I want to, you know, implore you to really take these tools, because as the data shows, one of the number one reasons that you can advance your career is to be an effective communicator. That's what the research shows. And in order to be effective communicator, you have to master the art of connecting. I provided these tools that can help you do that in this PDF. I'll send it out again. Beyond that, I think my time is kind of getting there. So, Marianne, thank you very much. I love this format. I love this platform. And that is it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It is kind of awesome, isn't it? It's very authentic. I thought, you know, for my last show for the year, what should I call it? And I'm like, please, this is the most authentic platform ever. It's like literally anybody talks about whatever, and everyone's like, what do you want me to talk about? I go, whatever is in your heart, like, you know, try to keep it clean. But I love this. So I absolutely love this. This was amazing. I really enjoyed this. I love anything to do with communication because Lord knows things get misconstrued in communication all the time. And people think they're communicating, you know, and they're not. They're not communicating as clearly as they could be, you know, in your head, it's a full sentence. But when you're saying it, you're like, how come she took that way? Or how come he misunderstood what I said? Well, yeah, that makes sense because look at it. Look at it now. When you're just looking at it, what's it sound like? You know, there's no, okay, we're going to do this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, this
If
has become,
that would be great.
yeah, I will definitely drop this back in the Facebook Live. And no, this is, it's interesting. I didn't think I was going to do these workshops as often as now they're being requested.
Right? If you could just stop sharing, that'd be awesome. And
Oh,
then
yes.
we're going to thank you again for a
Yeah.
wonderful
Yep.
Absolutely wonderful presentation as always. So this is also Cedric's, I don't even know which visit to us. It's not the first.
Multiple.
We have multiple repetition. People love it here. I love it. I'm so happy people are comfortable here on my platform. It's like you're coming into my home. So, only we get to do it all over the world, which is wonderful. So thank you, Cedric, so much. And Cedric is also in my next book. We had a couple of glitches yesterday, so we're a little bit slow to release it. I was really hoping to release the book here, but that didn't happen, but that's okay. That's the kind of stuff. I'm sure it'll be up and about next week. Keep an eye out on it. It is called Self-Empowerment Reset, Our Rocky Road to Inner Peace. Actually, there's quite a few authors on here that are in the book as well. So Cedric is amazing, and I'm sure we'll see him again. Cedric, thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. Feel free to stay with us as long as you can.